The Railways of Crotunia has been brought to you in part by...
Here at Super Bowl Lanes, we're about fun, community, and involvement.
Whether you're at the grill or the alley, at Super Bowl Lanes, it's always a good time.
At Super Bowl Lanes, we care about the importance of family, teamwork, community, and of course, fun. Super Bowl Lanes is a proud sponsor of the Meal on Tune channel. Super Bowl Lanes, let the good times bowl.
Tilly the little engine had been working very hard. Ever since her great rescue of the fairy tale Arrow, Miss Ella had been assigning her more out-of-the-yard work, which made her very happy indeed. She loves visiting new places and meeting the other engines who help run the railway. One day, Mrs. Ella had an important job for her. We've got some spare parts from the works to go to the mainland and some goods bound for Pinewood Island scheduled for the noon Pinewood goods. I need you to take them to Gradinia Bay so they can be brought to their respective destinations. Oh, yes, ma'am, said Tilly excitedly. Gradinia Bay is one of the biggest stations and towns on the Crotunian main line, and there were lots of friends she knew there, like Skarloey and Rheneas, the narrow-gauge engines, and Piper, the steam-electric shunter. She collected the spare parts from the goods shed where Farnsworth was getting oiled up from his morning local run. Well, if it isn't the little switch engine who's off to haul a real engine's train, he said dismissively. Now, Farnsworth, said Jason. Wasn't it her who took a train you inadvertently caused to derail? It shut him up instantly. As Tilly backed down on the freight cars, an awkward clanking sound was heard. It was like a pair of exercise weights being bumped together. But outside of the freight cars, nobody else heard it. Tilly soon collected her cars from the goods depot and set off for the junction. But the clanging noise kept ringing out, and the shunters who were fastening cars together in the yard were very worried. As she passed through the cuttings between Colville and Gradinia Bay, the clanking seemed to get louder and louder. Until... clang! One of Tilly's glides got jammed. Now it would be much harder to push her driving wheels along. But Tilly didn't want to stop to let another engine take over. I shouldn't give up. What will Mrs. Ella say if I told her I'd broken down with a very important train? So the little engine decided to press on. She passed through a nearby halt where the Greendale rocket was taking on water. As she passed through, there was a small hissing sound that seemed to follow her. Tilly, called the rocket, did you fill up with water before heading out with the train? But it was no use. She was next to the brake van by the time her message was finished. Soon, Tilly reached the busy town of Gradinia Bay. Trucks rattled past on the roadways and overpass, construction cranes whizzed about with their work, and there stood the big hill just before the station. Whoop whoop, whistled Henry, who was passing through with an express freight. Mind the hill today, the sea salt's making it a bit rough. Tilly was ready for hills, so she fired off her sandboxes and charged at the hill. The freight cars tried to slip on their brakes, but Tilly was sure to beat them and press on. As she took on the final slope, James hurried up with a small vegetable train from Fawcett. He heard a nasty hissing sound near Tilly when suddenly, pop, a bolt shot out from one of Tilly's pistons. Rocketing rivets, shouted James. What's gotten into you, Tilly? Don't think I can manage this hill, eh, James? Said Tilly excitedly as she made the final incline. No, I mean there's something wrong inside of your... Bang! A huge noise rocketed through the station yard. What was that? Shouted Station Master Scatterbrain, who'd been in the yards checking over a delivery from the main line. Robbers? Fireworks? A truck backfiring? I think you'll find it's a breakdown, said a worried James. Tilly had finally made herself run too much. Her conductor clambered into her cab and examined her controls. "Oh, I knew it," she said. "She's clean out of water. Boiler tube explosion seems to be it. You worked yourself hard enough to boil water for the whole town."
"Jam piston glad too," called a workman.
"It's a miracle she made it to the yard safely." Tilly felt horrible. She felt like she had readied herself for the scrap heap. Later that evening, Mrs. Ella visited the Colville Works, where workmen were busily freeing Tilly's glide. Tilly's wheels shuddered a little bit. She feared the absolute worst. But instead of a, "Tilly, what did you do?" or a, "Tilly, why wasn't the job finished right?" she heard a very worried, "Tilly, are you all right?" I think so. I'm really sorry about the train this morning. "Oh, never mind the train," said Mrs. Ella. "What matters right now is how you feel." "Well, I do hurt a little bit, but I thought the train was a big priority, so I pressed on." "I appreciate hard work from my engines," she said. "But I also want to make sure that nobody gets hurt. If you sense that something is wrong, you've got to let someone know. That's just using your stack." "Yes, ma'am. I'll be sure to be more careful next time." "And one more thing," Mrs. Ella said, as she exited the works. "Yes?" asked Tilly. "Get yourself a good night's sleep." And after her little trip up the line, Tilly was sure never to push herself too far again. Really useful engines need their brakes too.